Welcome back to our Cael language series. Now, over the past several months, we've been working really hard on our sentence and paragraph writing skills. We've learned how to write an essay, and we've also now practiced our reading and listening skills. So today we're going to put all of that hard work together by learning how to write an essay using information from the reading and listening passages on the Cael test. So we're going to start in at part 4 on the Cael test. All right, so the very first thing you're going to see when you get to part 4 on the Cael test is you're going to see the long reading passage. So you'll be given around 20 minutes or so to read over this text to answer about 11 questions about that. Now later on, when you get to the writing section for part 4, you will be using some information from this article in order to write the essay. So as you're answering these questions, try to keep your mind open to the information you're reading about. It's going to help you find details later on. Once you finish the reading, you're then going to move on to the long listening section in part 4. So here you'll listen to an academic lecture that's about 5 minutes or so long. You'll have another 11 questions or so to answer there as well. Once again, information that you're learning about in this lecture, you're going to be pulling from in order to help you write the essay next. So as you're listening, try your best to remember the details as they're being discussed. So once you've completed the reading and the listening, you will arrive at the long writing section here on the Cael test. So this is the end of part 4. For the long writing, you'll be given 35 minutes to read over the instructions, understand the question, gather your information from the source material, and write the essay. There's a lot to do in 35 minutes of time, but with the right time management program, I think we'll get there. We just have to know how to organize the information first, which is what we're going to talk about today. So looking at the screen here, let's just go over the instructions first of all, so that everybody understands what they need to do to write this essay. So first of all, you are absolutely required to use details and examples from the source material. The source material on Cael is the reading and the lecture passages that you've just read over and that you've just listened to. So you're going to pull details from those two sources to answer the question. But the raters are looking for you to be able to paraphrase your ideas. So you're going to use the ideas presented, but you'll write about them in your own words. That's where part of your score will come from as you complete this essay. There is a minimum word count that you must achieve. So the essay has to be at least 250 words long. And you'll see that there's a word counter right over here above the writing area that you'll be doing. So keep an eye, when you see that you've reached 250 words, you know that at least you fulfilled that requirement for the essay. Now there's no maximum word count, so you can write as many words as you want, but remember you've got 35 minutes only to complete the entire essay. And every idea you include in the writing has to answer the question asked. So I think aiming for close to 250 words is likely the best goal here. Now the evaluation of your essay will always be the same. The raters are looking for 3 or 4 key areas. So first of all, they're going to double check that the content details you've included from the source material is accurate and correct. They're also going to look to see how you've organized or structured that essay. So an essay, remember, has several different paragraphs. You're always going to have a short introduction and a short conclusion. You'll probably have at least 2 different paragraphs as well in the middle of your essay. And each paragraph in the middle will discuss a different main idea that answers the question. So on average, for the part 4 long writing piece, your essay will probably be about 4 paragraphs long. Could even be 5 paragraphs if you came up with an additional reason to support your thesis. But bear that in mind, please. You should definitely have more than 1 paragraph. The raters will be checking for that. The next thing they look at will be your vocabulary. So the raters would like to see you use academic and high-level vocabulary, since the Cael is an academic test. They're also looking for you to vary the language and to demonstrate a nice range. So we don't want to just repeat the same language over and over. We hopefully have a strong enough vocabulary that we can create that variety. The last thing, once I've mentioned again, is the use of the source material. So do make sure that you're choosing details from both the reading and the listening passages, and try your best to balance those out. So if you could find, say, 2 details from the reading passage, then maybe you can also find 2 details from the listening passage, and that provides more of a balance. Now, if you have some of your own personal life experiences that support the topic that you're writing about, it's perfectly fine to include those in the essay, provided they're on topic and they actually answer the question. But keep in mind again that part of your score comes from the source material and how well you've used it. So I would recommend that you rely more heavily on details from the reading and listening. Do that first. And if you're able to work in a personal example or 2, then that's fine. But again, make sure you're using that source material. So this is what it looks like when you click on the reading passage tab at the very top. You're going to pull open once again that long text that you've already read through at the beginning of part 4. So you've read it through, you've answered questions, it's somewhat familiar in your mind. So I'm hoping that you can remember where you've seen certain details before. And likewise, you'll use the scroll bar too, I should mention, just to navigate down the page to see the entire article. You're also going to click on the lecture notes tab here at the top when it comes time to reference the listening materials. Now you can't listen again, you can't replay the lecture, but the computer here is offering you a summarized version or outline of all the important points that were discussed in the lecture itself. So hopefully looking at this outline will jog your memory and you'll know exactly what you can include in the essay itself. So I think it's now time to dive deeply here into the question itself, now that we all understand how we're being assessed and where to find the information on the page. You're going to read through the question to fully understand what it is you're being asked to do. So this question says, should scientists go back and reanalyze established conclusions and facts, or should we spend time on new questions and new research instead? So you see here that the question is giving you 2 different choices, and you are going to select one position only. Please do not write about both of them. Choose one and only one, and every detail in your essay will support that one position that you've chosen. So the rest of these instructions in the question say, explain your position. And when you explain your position, what you're really doing is you are selecting that one side of the argument from the question itself. So will you, in this case, decide to look at the past and go back and reanalyze those past theories? Or are you going to write all about how it's more important for historians to forge ahead and do new research? So once again, choose one of those positions, not both. The second thing that the test instructions ask you to do is to build an argument. And in order to do this, then what you'll do is review the reading and listening materials and choose some relevant details or ideas that explain why your position is valid. So for this essay, if we choose to support position 1, if we want to focus our writing all about how we should go back and look at past theories, we're going to have to come up with 2 reasons why, maybe even 3, but let's start with 2 reasons why we feel that way, why historians should go back to the past. And last but not least, you also need to provide support. So this is again where you go into the reading passage and those lecture notes on the screen here to find specific examples or specific details that are going to support those 2 main reasons that you've explained. Okay, all of this can easily be done in an outline. So I'm going to show you what's involved with that. You need to decide which position to choose first, and you need to do so very, very quickly. Remember, you've only got 35 minutes, and you've probably taken a good 30 seconds at least just to read through this question and understand what it's asking you to do. So what I would encourage you to try is open up the reading passage here. We can see it on the screen in front of us. This is the first paragraph from that text. I would quickly skim read this through and see if we can find any information to support one of those 2 positions that has been identified in the question. So as we start skim reading, we notice the very first sentence talks about how history should not be seen as fully objective. And then as we continue to skim read, we see that I guess there are lots of people who have their own opinions about things like religion and politics. And as a result of their own opinions, they sometimes give biased accounts. So their opinions cloud the truth sometimes as they're sharing stories and passing that down. That's what this paragraph is telling us. And as we continue to skim read, we notice that there's a great example of one of these biased or less objective accounts. So the Persians, where we read, have been described in the past as either the enemy or the other by Greek historians. So again, I guess the Greeks in past history had their own opinions, and those opinions did not paint the Persian people in a favorable light. So it's the biased opinions of the Greek historians then that is leading to some ideas that aren't necessarily true. So all of this information in just the first paragraph of the reading passage supports position number 1. We can see why it would then be important to go back and look at past history and reanalyze it to uncover the truths that were maybe not disclosed back then. Now, before I just start typing my essay away, I want to double check that I'm going to find at least one supporting detail from the lecture notes too. If I want to talk about the past, great. But remember, the raters want to see that I've got a balanced use of my source material. So I can't replay the lecture, but looking at the notes that the computer is offering me here, I see listed 2 different theories that I remember hearing the speaker tell me about. She was talking all about the domestication of animals in that lecture that we finished earlier, and she identified the Oasis theory and Joel Cohen's theory. And I remember the gist of those theories talked about how some facts portrayed there about the domestication of animals have some foundation in the truth, but the speaker let us know that there are other areas of these theories that we now know were not true at all. So both of these theories give really nice examples, again, to support position 1, where we should really go back and look at these theories that were put forth in the past and reanalyze them so that we have a better picture of the world around us. So using all of this information then, before we start typing into the computer screen, it would be very helpful if we could create a little outline on a piece of paper using a pen. So the test administrators are going to give you pen and paper. And at the very top of that piece of paper, I would write down the position that you've already decided you're going to write about. So from those 2 choices in the test question, we've decided for this essay that it's just easier to talk about how it's important to reanalyze the past theories, because we've already got lots of supporting details that we can think about to support that notion. So I would write down that position at the very top. This is what you're going to talk about in your introductory paragraph. You might only have 2 or 3 sentences here for the Cael test, and that's great, that's fine. But you must establish that you think it's more important then for historians to reanalyze the past. That's the whole point of this entire essay as we're choosing to write it. So the next thing we're going to do then is come up with 2 main reasons why we feel it's more important to go back to past theories. So based on the discussions that we've just had now about both the reading passage and the listening notes, I think it would be a very safe first main idea to suggest how personal biases distort the truth. So we've talked about now how the Greek people had a negative account of the Persians and referred to them sometimes as the other or as the enemy. So we can use that as one specific example to support this main idea, all about personal biases. Now, thinking back to our discussion of the lecture notes with those 2 theories about animal domestication, I can't offhand think of an idea there that would actually support a personal bias. So because I can't readily think of a listening idea, what I'll do instead is I'll go back to the reading passage and I'll draw another example from there. And you know, from having answered the reading questions earlier in part 4, I distinctly remember reading all about how the Greeks conquered the Persian people in a war. And as a result, because the Greeks won, they over-exaggerated their own importance. And I remember reading about that more towards the bottom of the passage because it was around the last couple of questions that I answered on the test. So what I would do then in this test situation is go back and click on that reading passage tab again, and I would use the scroll bar to let my eyes scan down the page, looking for keywords that talk about the Greeks beating the Persians in a war. So my eyes eventually then would land here. So I see the Greeks won decisive victories. So I remember this section, this is what I'm looking for. And again, as I scan through the rest of this article, or this passage, I should say, I'm seeing that when Greece emerged as a cultural and philosophical center of Europe, the conflict was given more significance in European history. So what that means in simple language is the Greeks won, so therefore they basically wrote history from their own perspective. They presented themselves as the powerful cultural and philosophical beings, and therefore they gave themselves more importance. So that's a great example of a bias, right? It's a Greek's own interpretation of their importance that was passed down, I guess, over history. So once again, this last part of the paragraph emphasizes what we were just talking about. So how the conflict between Europe and the Middle East was influenced by these perceptions of Greek historians, simply because it was the Greeks who conquered the Persians. So it's usually the people with the power who then can tell the tales that are passed down through history. So I'm going to use this example then to support my, my main idea number 1. I'll just add that in my own words here for my outline. I want to talk about how the Greeks conquered the Persians and therefore they exaggerated their cultural significance in Europe. So I'll write one paragraph all about those 2 ideas. Now, because I've got 2 ideas from the reading passage to support this first main idea, when I get down to the second main idea then, I'd be safer to choose 2 examples from the listening passages. And doing it that way is going to balance out my use of the source material. So thinking of a second reason why we think it's important for historians to go back to past theories, considering those 2 theories of animal domestication that we spoke about in the listening, the oasis theory and the Joel Cohen theory, I think it's safe to say that if we can go back and sort of fix or correct the faulty ideas from these past theories, we'll have a much better understanding or a more accurate understanding of the world around us. So I'm going to use that as my main reason why, again, it's important to go back to the past to reanalyze. And then I can discuss both the oasis theory and the Cohen theory in that particular paragraph to show how going back and now understanding what these mistakes were will help us to understand the world as far as animal domestication is involved. So I now have the basis there of my entire essay ready to go. So I'll know exactly what to write about, and I know exactly how many paragraphs I'm going to talk about too. So just a quick recap, I've got 2 examples from the reading passage here. And in the bottom paragraph, I've got 2 examples from the listening passage. So I've definitely balanced out my use of the source material. That should keep the readers happy. I could probably think of a few ideas from my own personal experience that might support these 2 main ideas. But you know what? I've only got 35 minutes and I've already got 4 specific examples. So for my essay, I don't think it's necessary to add any more details at this time. If I had an unlimited amount of time to write, sure. But on the test in 35 minutes, what I've got here is more than enough to show that I can write an essay and support it accurately too. When it comes time to doing the concluding paragraph, I'll just briefly summarize the main points that I talked about. So I won't worry about adding any details here for my outline. So let's recap what we just talked about here today. We focused on how to get started answering this question. So how to capture the ideas and organize them in outline form. So when it comes time to start this long writing piece on the Cael test, the first thing, of course, we're going to do is read through the question and choose the position that we agree with. Choose one position only. Please do not argue both sides. That is not an essay. Choose one position. Review both the reading passage and those listening notes, and then identify a couple of reasons why your position or your opinion is true. Once you've got those ideas in mind, this is where I would start to just keep track of them on a piece of paper in outline form. So if you can write down your position at the top of the page and then identify the 2 main reasons for those 2 middle paragraphs, you'll know exactly what to talk about once you start writing that essay. Once you've got those main ideas in place, you are going to skim read the passage, the reading passage, and look at those listening notes again. So now you're going to pull out specific examples and details from both of those sources that will support the main ideas that you've created. Remember, one paragraph discusses one main idea. You have to keep these main ideas separate. Don't mix them up together. That will really make a mess of the organization. So one main idea, one paragraph. So for the example we're looking at today, we've got 2 middle paragraphs and therefore 2 main reasons why we think it's important to go back and reanalyze the past. So you add all of these details you find into your outline itself, so it keeps you on track and you're ready to start typing. And again, always ensure that there's a balance. So today we were able to find 2 examples from the reading and 2 examples from the listening. So the rater should be happy with that attempt. All right, so now we've got a very well detailed and organized outline. Join me next week as we use the ideas that we've gathered today in this outline to start actually writing out the essay. I will see you then.